What if some of its biggest legends weren't just charming or talented? They were also hilariously, humanly dumb. Today, we are going to talk about old Hollywood legends who were actually dumb real life. We are not saying this. These were the words by their close friends, media reports, and even by their spouses. Johnny Weissmuller. Before Hollywood discovered him, Johnny Weissmuller was a record-breaking Olympic swimmer with 5 gold medals and a bronze. In 1932, MGM handed him the vine and cast him as Tarzan, turning his primal yell into box office gold. But once the cameras stopped rolling, Weissmuller's intelligence, or lack thereof, became a running joke in the industry. According to studio accounts, Weissmuller often struggled with reading scripts and had difficulty memorizing lines. Director W.S. Van Dyke allegedly simplified scenes for him, choosing action over dialogue. He was famous for improvising unintelligible grunts when he forgot lines. "We just let him swing," one crew member quipped in a 1940 Variety profile. He was better with the rope than the script. Despite earning substantial income, Weissmuller made disastrous financial decisions. He invested in failed hotels and gimmicky businesses, including a bizarre attempt to launch a chain of Tarzan-themed restaurants. By the 1960s, he was broke. In interviews, friends described him as affable but incredibly naive. His personal life reflected the same impulsive streak. Married 5 times, he once proposed to a woman he met in a club the night before. Even his final years were marred by confusion. Living in a Las Vegas hotel, he reportedly wandered the halls in his robe, still calling himself Tarzan. Fame gave him immortality, but it also masked a staggering lack of awareness. Ed Wood. No conversation about bad decisions in Hollywood is complete without Edward Davis Wood Jr. A filmmaker by passion and self-declared genius, Wood had an imagination bigger than any studio budget, but absolutely no idea how to execute it. His 1959 film, Plan 9 from Outer Space, is widely labeled the worst movie ever made. He cast aging silent film star Bela Lugosi shortly before his death, then substituted him with a taller actor who covered his face with a cape. The flying saucers were paper plates on strings. Wood insisted it was high art. Colleagues recounted his inability to understand basic filmmaking techniques. He often filmed entire scenes without checking focus, and his scripts were riddled with grammatical errors and baffling logic. Actor Paul Marco once said Wood believed every line he wrote was pure Shakespeare. In Nightmare of Ecstasy, a biography by Rudolph Gray, Wood is described as endlessly optimistic and delusional, convinced that his failures were ahead of their time. He never recognized his own shortcomings and often blamed critics for not getting it. He died in 1978, penniless and forgotten, living off cheap whiskey and typewritten dreams. Only decades later did cult fame find him, too late to change the fact that Ed Wood was not just a bad filmmaker. He was a man utterly unaware that he lacked the tools for the empire he thought he ruled. Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield had a reported IQ of 163, spoke 5 languages, and played classical violin. But she built her entire career on playing the dumb blonde, a role she leaned into so heavily, even studio heads believed it was real. The tragedy wasn't that she lacked intelligence, it was how she weaponized stupidity to climb ladders that eventually crumbled beneath her. From the moment she burst onto the scene in the 1950s, Mansfield flooded tabloids with outrageous antics, wardrobe malfunctions, champagne-filled bathtubs, and interviews peppered with risque one-liners. Her public persona overshadowed any potential for serious acting. When cast in The Girl Can't Help It and Will Success, Spoil Rock Hunter, critics dismissed her performance as parody. Industry insiders, including biographer Martha Saxton, noted that Mansfield often sabotaged her own chances at longevity. She once turned down a Broadway revival offer because it didn't include television exposure. On the set of Promises, Hollywood's first mainstream nude film, she focused more on shock value than character work. Behind the scenes, her life spiraled into chaotic decisions. Her marriage to bodybuilder Mickey Hargitay ended in bitter court battles. She aligned herself with fringe figures, including Anton LaVey of the Church of Satan, and surrounded herself with questionable publicity stunts. At the height of her fame, she appeared in a string of low-budget European films with incoherent scripts and little direction. Mansfield's accidental death in 1967 sealed her image in public memory, not as a brilliant woman boxed in by the system, but as a cautionary tale of an actress who leaned so hard into the dumb blonde act she couldn't escape it when it started to sink. Wallace Berry. Wallace Berry stood as one of MGM's most bankable stars during the 1930s, commanding the screen with his gruff charm and lumbering presence. He won an Academy Award for The Champ in 1931, yet among insiders, he was whispered about not for his acting range, but for his intellectual limitations and violent temper. Berry's behavior on set became infamous. Directors frequently complained about his inability to follow nuanced direction. His scripts were often rewritten to eliminate emotional depth or complicated phrasing. According to MGM records cited in The Fixers by E.J. Fleming, Berry would memorize lines phonetically, lacking true understanding of the words. Joan Crawford loathed working with him. He was cruel, stupid, and arrogant, she allegedly told a friend, after enduring his bullying during the filming of Grand Hotel. Other actors, including Jackie Cooper, recalled being physically hurt by Berry's reckless improvisation during scenes. In one interview, Cooper revealed Berry would pinch him to make him cry on camera. Off camera, Berry's decisions bordered on the absurd. He invested in ostrich farms and novelty candy shops, insisting they would become the next gold rush. When asked to speak on political matters at a studio function, he reportedly responded, "I ain't got time for them kind of thinking." Even in his prime, executives considered him difficult and intellectually limited. Despite his success, few saw him as more than a reliable brawler on screen, an actor who delivered box office returns but required careful handling, simplified scripts, and a wide berth to avoid confrontation. Wallace Berry's legacy endures in film history, but not because of intellect or insight. Rather, because brute force occasionally gets mistaken for charisma. George Raft. George Raft had the looks, the voice, and the streetwise swagger that epitomized 1930s gangster cinema. He was Humphrey Bogart before Bogart was a star. But where Bogart ascended, Raft repeatedly, almost comically, shot himself in the foot. Not for lack of opportunity, but for making some of the worst career choices in Hollywood history. Born in Hell's Kitchen, Raft's real-life connections to organized crime helped him land his earliest roles. He could dance, throw a punch, and wear a fedora like he was born in one. But according to multiple biographies, including Louis Yablonsky's The Gangster Life, Raft had little interest in scripts and rarely read them in full. He selected roles based on how tough the guy looked, once rejecting a major part because he sounded like a sissy. He famously turned down The Maltese Falcon, a role that made Bogart a star. He rejected Casablanca, thinking it was a weird little war picture. And when offered Double Indemnity, he passed on it, uncomfortable with the moral ambiguity. Studio heads grew exasperated. One memo from Warner Brothers in 1942 described Raft as consistently uncooperative and alarmingly short-sighted. Raft's personal associations only deepened the narrative of his imprudence. He maintained close friendships with mobsters like Bugsy Siegel and Frank Costello, frequently gambling away his money at underground casinos. When pressed about his choices, Raft shrugged, saying, "I go with what I know." His career faded as quickly as it had risen, overtaken by the very actors who took the roles he dismissed. By the 1960s, he was making cameos in second-rate films, his early promise long eclipsed by his stubborn refusal to think beyond the surface. George Raft wasn't forgotten because of what he did, but because of everything he chose not to do. Buster Crabbe. Clarence Linden. Buster Crabbe was America's golden boy in 1932, winning a gold medal in the 400-meter freestyle at the Summer Olympics. With his athletic build and chiseled features, it wasn't long before Hollywood came calling. He became a serial screen hero: Tarzan, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers. But behind the action hero facade was a man who never quite grasped the machinery of the industry that made him. Crabbe admitted in later interviews that he never read full scripts. He focused on stunts, not character arcs. In Flash Gordon, his lines were often dubbed post-production because he flubbed them during takes. Director Frederick Stefani had to design scenes with minimal dialogue to ensure continuity. Despite his repeated success in low-budget serials, Crabbe resisted branching out into more challenging roles. He declined dramatic scripts, believing audiences didn't want to see him as anything but an action man. As film historian Richard Band noted in Serial Kings, Crabb never evolved because he thought evolution wasn't necessary. His investments reflected similar logic. He once poured his earnings into a chain of backyard swimming pool franchises, only to be bankrupted by legal disputes and maintenance issues. When offered a TV reboot of Flash Gordon in the 1950s, he demanded creative control, then lost interest midway through development, leaving producers scrambling. Crabb's downfall wasn't scandalous or dramatic. It was marked by a quiet refusal to grow. He stayed loyal to his image long after the public had moved on. He wasn't a fool in the classic sense, but in a business that demanded adaptation, Buster Crabbe remained stuck in a loop of splashy entrances and wooden exits. Esther Williams. Esther Williams carved out a glittering niche for herself as Hollywood's million-dollar mermaid. Her aquatic musicals in the 1940s and 1950s dazzled audiences with synchronized swimming, lavish costumes, and high dives choreographed like ballet. But beyond the glitter and water tanks, Williams had little understanding or concern for the mechanics of her stardom or the rapidly changing film industry around her. Williams was athletic, charming, and photogenic, but she wasn't known for her intellectual curiosity. In her own memoir, The $1,000,000 Mermaid, she admitted to rarely reading her scripts before arriving on set. She once joked, "If it doesn't involve a pool, I'm not interested." Directors like Charles Walters often had to design scenes around her physical capabilities rather than any dramatic talent. Her personal life was no less haphazard. She married 4 times, including to Fernando Lamas, who famously insisted she give up her career and defer to his. She agreed. When asked in a 1984 interview why she allowed it, she simply said, "He was strong. I liked strong." Friends remarked on her lack of business sense, especially when she passed up offers for television, believing the medium was beneath her, even as her film roles dried up. Williams also made poor entrepreneurial choices. Her line of swimwear collapsed due to poor management and failed marketing strategy. By the late 1960s, she was financially insecure and struggling to re-enter the public eye. She didn't understand how to reinvent herself or engage with newer audiences. Her beauty and skills had brought her to the top, but once the MGM water tanks dried up, so did her relevance. Esther Williams was never accused of being unintelligent, but she was shockingly indifferent to everything that didn't sparkle on the surface. In an industry built on reinvention, she stayed still and sank quietly out of the spotlight. Milton Burl. Milton Burl was a household name in the 1950s, earning the nickname Mr. Television for his pioneering work in early broadcast comedy. He was the face of Texaco Star Theater, pulling in more than 80% of the national audience at his peak. But despite his monumental success, Burley was notorious for making foolish, egocentric decisions that eroded both his legacy and credibility. Burley was known for stealing jokes from other comedians, brazenly. Writers on staff frequently complained that he would reuse old gags, sometimes from vaudeville routines 2 decades out of date. When CBS executives tried to modernize the show, Burley refused. "This is what made me famous," he insisted, even as ratings began to slide. His behavior backstage was erratic. Biographers, including Gerald Nachman in Seriously Funny, detail how Burley demanded approval over scripts he didn't read and fired writers on a whim. His instincts were often wrong. He passed on multiple innovative format changes and refused to share the spotlight, fearing other comedians might steal his thunder. Burley also made baffling business decisions. He turned down a lucrative film contract with MGM because he didn't want to cut back his nightclub appearances, missing out on a chance to transition into cinema. In 1960, he invested in a series of comedy clubs under his name, but refused to visit any of them, and they all collapsed within 2 years. Despite his pioneering role in television, Burley became a relic. He never grasped the changing humor of the 1960s and 70s. When he finally agreed to guest appearances in later years, his jokes were seen as out of touch and painfully dated. Milton Burl helped build the foundation of TV comedy, but failed to understand that staying on top meant learning, adapting, and sometimes stepping aside. He never did. Frank Fay. Frank Fay was once considered one of the greatest stage comedians in America. His timing, voice control, and command of live audiences during the 1920s earned him top billing in vaudeville and Broadway. But behind the curtain, Fay was a toxic combination of arrogance, prejudice, and stunning social ignorance. He didn't just derail his own career, he alienated an entire industry that once revered him. Fay's success made him believe he was untouchable. In his early days at Warner Brothers, studio memos noted how difficult he was to direct. He ignored cues, rewrote scripts without permission, and mocked crew members openly. George Burns once called him the funniest man who ever lived and the most detestable human being I ever met. His behavior offstage was even worse. He openly voiced anti-Semitic and racist views at a time when most of Hollywood, run by Jewish studio moguls, was beginning to distance itself from overt bigotry. During Prohibition, he made headlines for drunken rants in nightclubs and was arrested multiple times for disorderly conduct. His wife, actress Barbara Stanwyck, eventually divorced him, citing physical and emotional abuse. Fay turned down offers to appear in sound films after 1931, believing talkies were beneath him. When he finally accepted a role in God's Gift to Women, his performance was so wooden and disconnected that critics eviscerated it. Within a decade, he was unemployable in film or radio. Biographers like Nick Tosh's point to Fay as a tragic figure, not because he lacked talent, but because he refused to see beyond his own reflection. By the 1950s, he was performing at second-rate clubs and sleeping in rented rooms, the industry having collectively shut its doors on him. Frank Fay's story isn't just one of ignorance, it's about the danger of mistaking applause for infallibility. William Frolley. William Frolley is best remembered for playing Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, a role that etched him into pop culture history. But behind the scenes, Frolley was a volatile, belligerent presence whose abrasive personality and lack of self-awareness often made him his own worst enemy. Before television saved his career, Frolley had been a struggling character actor throughout the 1930s and 40s. He was known around studios for being difficult to direct, frequently slurring his lines due to chronic alcoholism. Directors, including Wesley Ruggles, reportedly refused to work with him after too many blown takes. He once had a scene removed entirely from Miracle on 34th Street because he couldn't stay sober long enough to deliver it properly. His reputation nearly cost him the I Love Lucy role. Lucille Ball initially opposed his casting, citing his erratic behavior and drinking. Desi Arnaz eventually agreed to bring him on, under strict conditions. Frolley had to remain sober on set and arrive on time. Surprisingly, he did. But off-set, his old habits resurfaced. He was known for starting bar fights and was banned from several Hollywood lounges for disruptive behavior. Frolley had little patience for modernizing his craft. He scoffed at acting classes and rehearsals, once telling a younger co-star, "If you need to practice, you shouldn't be in this business." His arrogance and lack of adaptability closed many doors. When I Love Lucy ended, producers were hesitant to cast him in anything substantial, fearing he'd regress to old patterns. Though a talented comic performer, William Frolley often mistook bluntness for wisdom and defiance for strength. He coasted on a single great role, but never understood how close he came to losing it all, simply because he refused to evolve, listen, or take responsibility for himself. Jean Arthur. Jean Arthur possessed one of the most distinct voices and on-screen personas of the 1930s and 40s. With her husky voice and expressive eyes, she shined in classics like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. Yet behind that charm was a woman who spent much of her career running, from fame, from the press, and often from her own success. Arthur had a well-documented fear of public speaking and social interaction, but more troubling was her inability, or unwillingness, to navigate the basic functions of the film industry. She refused press interviews, rejected public appearances, and rarely engaged with studio heads. According to Frank Capra, she would leave through back exits and sometimes vanish between projects, avoiding contact for months. Her anxiety bordered on professional sabotage. During filming for The More the Merrier, Arthur allegedly had breakdowns over lighting and costumes and insisted on filming without crew members watching. Director George Stevens had to rebuild entire sets to accommodate her discomfort. Despite winning an Oscar nomination, Arthur later dismissed the film as a miserable experience. She also declined major roles that could have sustained her stardom. She turned down His Girl Friday, It's a Wonderful Life, and even parts written specifically for her. When Columbia Pictures offered her a contract extension in 1944, she rejected it in favor of semi-retirement, retreating to her apartment with no clear plan. Arthur eventually returned to teach acting at Vassar College in the 1960s, but even then, students reported that she was often evasive, cryptic, and emotionally distant. Her brilliance was real, but so was her detachment. Jean Arthur didn't fall from grace because she wasn't talented. She drifted away because she couldn't, or wouldn't, function within the world that made her a star. Rod Steiger. Rod Steiger earned critical acclaim for his intense, brooding performances in films like On the Waterfront, The Pawnbroker, and In the Heat of the Night. He won an Academy Award and worked with some of the greatest directors of his time. But his extreme devotion to method acting, combined with his emotional volatility and poor professional judgment, turned him into a cautionary tale within the industry. Steiger's approach to acting was immersive, so immersive that it frequently alienated co-stars. On the set of Dr. Zhivago, director David Lean reportedly clashed with Steiger over his refusal to rehearse scenes cold. Steiger insisted on working himself into a psychological state before shooting, sometimes delaying production for hours. Omar Sharif described working with him as emotionally exhausting. His perfectionism often crossed into self-sabotage. He turned down the role of Patton, a performance that later won George C. Scott an Oscar, because he thought the script lacked emotional subtlety. He also rejected The Godfather, saying it was too commercial. He later admitted to regretting both decisions, but continued to spurn mainstream roles in favor of smaller, less coherent projects that offered creative freedom. In interviews, Steiger would frequently blame the industry for not understanding him, yet colleagues recalled his erratic mood swings and refusal to compromise. Director Sidney Lumet once said, "Rod was brilliant, but he made things harder than they had to be, on everyone." In his later years, Steiger struggled with depression and financial instability, appearing in low-budget foreign films and television episodes just to make ends meet. He believed he was misunderstood, but never saw how his own rigid ideals and self-importance cut him off from opportunity. His talent was immense, but it became a cage of his own making. Earl Hollowman. Earl Hollowman entered Hollywood with the promise of a long and steady climb. He won a Golden Globe for The Rainmaker in 1956 and starred alongside legends like Elvis Presley and John Wayne. Yet, despite his early momentum and undeniable screen presence, Hollowman's career plateaued. Those who worked with him described him as likable but limited, a man who never fully grasped the importance of reinvention. Studio memos from the late 1950s reveal Hollowman's reluctance to challenge himself. He repeatedly turned down roles that required accent work or emotional complexity, insisting he was better suited for good old American fellas. When approached for the role in Judgment at Nuremberg, he declined, citing it as too political. The part eventually went to William Shatner. His acting choices reflected a pattern of playing it safe. Directors grew frustrated by his resistance to direction. Richard Fleischer, who directed Hollowman in The Trap, later remarked that he wasn't difficult, he just didn't stretch. Hollowman avoided stage roles, refused to train in dialect, and made few appearances outside the Western or war genre. Off-screen, his business decisions were equally shallow. He invested most of his earnings into a restaurant venture in Burbank, which failed within 3 years due to mismanagement. He declined television opportunities in the early 60s, believing that film roles would always come his way. While Hollowman continued working in small parts into the 1980s, his presence dimmed with each passing year. He was never disliked, he was never scandalized, but he also never grew. In a town that rewards risk, Earl Hollowman built a career on predictability and watched it quietly fade. Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre was one of the most distinctive faces in cinema, bug-eyed, soft-voiced, with an eerie screen presence that made him unforgettable in roles like M and the Maltese Falcon. But the very quirks that set him apart also boxed him into a narrow corner of Hollywood. Despite his intelligence and sharp wit, Lorre made surprisingly limited choices, many of them guided more by insecurity than ambition. Lorre arrived in Hollywood in the 1930s after fleeing Nazi Germany. Fluent in several languages and classically trained, he nevertheless accepted whatever roles came his way, terrified of unemployment in a new land. He quickly became typecast as a villain, madman, or foreign eccentric. When offered more mainstream roles, he often rejected them, believing audiences wouldn't accept him outside the shadows. He openly resented the industry, but refused to challenge it. Director John Huston once offered him a dramatic role that would have reshaped his image, but Lohr turned it down, saying he didn't want to confuse people. In Roundup, The Usual Suspects, biographer Donald Spoto notes that Lohr's greatest enemy wasn't Hollywood, it was his own lack of confidence. He also made baffling personal choices. Addicted to morphine during the 1940s, Lohr drained his finances on pills and medical quackery. He rarely negotiated his contracts, allowing studios to pay him far below his co-stars. At one point, he borrowed money from Boris Karloff to avoid eviction from his Hollywood apartment. Lohr was no fool. His intellect was widely acknowledged by colleagues, but he was profoundly unsure of his worth, and let that fear keep him locked in the same roles, the same stories, and ultimately the same quiet obscurity. Peter Lohr had the mind of a philosopher and the heart of a ghost, drifting through a system he never dared to defy. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was many things: sultry, mysterious, commanding. She captivated the world in The Blue Angel in Morocco, her image crafted to perfection by director Josef von Sternberg. But behind the camera, Dietrich constructed a performance far more enduring than any role she played. She cloaked herself in strategic ignorance, feigning simplicity, even stupidity, to maneuver through an industry that wanted her seductive but silent. Studio records from Paramount in the 1930s reveal that Dietrich would often pretend not to understand English during contract disputes, though she was fluent. When asked to comment on politics, she demurred, claiming to know very little about such matters. She allowed male directors to shape her lighting, blocking, and even dialogue delivery, cultivating a persona of passive compliance. In private, she was anything but. Her letters, now preserved in the Berlin State Library, reveal a razor-sharp mind. But Dietrich chose not to project that intelligence publicly. "Men are frightened of smart women," she once said to a journalist. "They prefer a whisper to a sentence." This calculated naivety came at a cost. As the studio system weakened in the 1950s, Dietrich had few options. She hadn't cultivated herself as a producer, director, or writer. Unlike contemporaries like Bette Davis or Katharine Hepburn, she had no fallback. She toured as a singer, draped in sequins, singing old standards, but the film world had moved on. Dietrich wasn't dumb, but she allowed herself to be underestimated to survive, and in doing so, limited her own legacy. She played the long game, but in playing it safe, she forfeited her full potential. What remained was the mask, beautiful, mysterious, and tragically one-dimensional. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis rose from a tough New York upbringing to become one of Hollywood's most recognizable leading men. With his matinee idol looks and magnetic screen presence, he starred in classics like Sweet Smell of Success and Some Like It Hot. But behind the charisma, Curtis was often criticized for his shallowness, both in performance and in life. Directors often noted that Curtis struggled with complex material. Billy Wilder once said that he had to pull the performance out of him frame by frame. His early years were defined by fluff roles and vanity projects, and even at the height of his fame, Curtis admitted he had no interest in the inner workings of the film industry. "I never read the scripts all the way through," he told a reporter in 1960. He made frequent miscalculations in interviews, once referring to Laurence Olivier as "that English guy who yells a lot." Curtis also passed on several serious roles that could have elevated his status, choosing instead projects that emphasized looks over substance. His relationships were equally impulsive. He married 6 times, often after whirlwind romances, and made headlines for petty, erratic behavior. Tony Curtis had raw talent and undeniable charm, but lacked the introspection or discipline to harness it for long-term greatness. Guy Madison. Guy Madison, born Robert Mosley, was discovered while working as a telephone lineman in California. One glance at his chiseled features, and he was whisked into stardom by agent Henry Wilson. But Madison's climb to fame wasn't accompanied by acting skill or professional savvy. He became the poster boy for actors who relied solely on appearance, lacking even the basic instincts for navigating a studio career. Critics were consistently underwhelmed by his performances. In Till the End of Time and The Charge at Feather River, Madison's line delivery was described as wooden, his facial expressions blank. Director William Castle remarked that Madison had the personality of a bookshelf, adding that multiple takes were required just to capture passable scenes. Despite this, he became a teen heartthrob during the 1950s. Studio insiders acknowledged he was photogenic and malleable, but admitted he had no ambition beyond showing up and hitting marks. He was known for asking producers which way to face the camera, even into his fourth film. Madison also made bizarre financial moves, purchasing a ranch in Wyoming with no staff or income plan. It quickly failed. By the 1960s, his career had withered, and he was reduced to dubbed European films and low-budget westerns. Guy Madison had every opportunity, but no idea what to do with it. What if the greatest architects of cinema became their own gatekeepers, locking away scenes, burning reels, and rewriting history with a single signature? From Prince's vanished color negatives to Georges Méliès's self-immolation of his own studio, 20 icons, actors, directors, musicians, took extraordinary steps to suppress the work they once championed. Their stories reveal a hidden undercurrent in Hollywood, where artistic vision and personal conviction collided, and entire chapters of film history slipped into darkness. Sean Young, a promising breakout in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner in 1980 and David Lynch's Dune in 1984, gave way to a career marked by controversy and, some allege, intentional erasure. Young's reported destruction of behind-the-scenes tapes stems from her own accounts. In a 1990 interview with Entertainment Weekly, she claimed to have burned every shred of footage that painted her as unstable. However, studio records and archive inventories show no missing reels, and Warner Brothers' publicity tapes from her 1991 Catwoman pitch survive intact in network vaults. Her dismissal from Batman in 1989, officially due to a horseback accident, ignited a public feud with Kim Basinger and Warner Brothers, during which Young threatened to destroy any footage she deemed unauthorized. That same year, she settled a harassment suit filed by James Woods and then fiancée Kristen Guthrie, an episode she later blamed on a studio conspiracy to derail her career. Yet no legal filings or insurance claims reference lost media. In 2018, Young faced misdemeanor charges for allegedly taking 2 laptops from a New York set. Charges dropped after their return, fueling speculation about her volatility. Archivists at UCLA's Film and Television Archive confirm that all known dailies and rushes from her major studio work are accounted for, with no gaps attributable to her intervention. As film historian Peter Hansen notes, Young's mythos of destroyed tapes says more about Hollywood gossip than archival fact. Her legacy remains a blend of on-set anecdotes and tabloid lore rather than concrete acts of suppression. Prince. When Prince experienced his famous spiritual awakening in December 1987, he didn't just pull the Black Album. He ordered the destruction of an estimated 500,000 pressed vinyl copies, deeming them dark and evil after what he called a transcendent communion with his muse. Promo discs, already in circulation, fewer than 10 worldwide, escaped his purge and now command upwards of $25,000 each at auction, per Rolling Stone reports. His film work suffered a similar fate. Following the lukewarm reception of Under the Cherry Moon in 1986, Prince insisted that all color prints be replaced with a sepia-toned master he personally supervised. Studio logs from Warner Brothers show the original negatives were sealed in a climate-controlled vault in 1988 and have not been touched since. Retrospectives occasionally screen a black and white version, approved in 1993 for the London Film Festival. But the full-color negative remains inaccessible, protected by the Prince Estate's strict licensing protocols established in 2017. Biographer Per Nilsson describes this as the ultimate assertion of artistic ownership, underscoring Prince's perfectionism across mediums. Despite fan petitions and archival requests lodged with the Library of Congress, the estate has refused any further public release. As a result, significant outtakes, such as the 12-minute opening sequence and an alternate ending featuring Carmen Electra, remain unseen, trapped behind a vault door that only Prince himself ever opened. Brigitte Bardot. Upon retiring in 1973 at age 39, Brigitte Bardot effectively froze much of her cinematic legacy. Known for defying studio demands, she refused to authorize uncut home video editions of And God Created Woman in 1956, leading U.S. distributors to offer only a heavily censored 82-minute cut under threat of legal action. French court documents reveal that Bardot's father, Louis, sued for the removal of indecent promotional stills from Menina, the girl in the bikini, in 1952, though the injunction was overturned on First Amendment grounds in 1954. Bardot's animal rights activism further tightened control. Any proposed reissue had to pass her personal review board, which demanded cuts to scenes deemed gratuitous or exploitative. As a result, only 12 of her 47 features appear on streaming platforms today, each edited to comply with her stipulations. In 1982, she successfully blocked a Channel 4 retrospective, citing her right to be forgotten under French privacy laws, an unprecedented move that left many early career films unexamined by scholars. Estate manager Richard Bacquelion confirms that original negatives remain stored at Gaumont's vault in Saint-Rémy-les-Chevreuse, but no uncut prints have been circulated since 1975. Bardot's decision to freeze rather than destroy has created an aura of scarcity. Cinephiles travel to private retrospectives in Paris and Rome to glimpse restored 35mm prints, while the general public must settle for truncated digital editions. Grace Jones. In 1982, Grace Jones captured her electrifying stage presence for One Man Show, a concert film shot on Betacam SP that Jones later deemed too raw for posterity and withheld from VHS or DVD release. The original 90-minute master tape remains locked in a Paris vault, accessible only to Jones's longtime manager, Jean-Paul Goude. Attempts by Polygram in 1995 and Island Records in 2005 to remaster the footage were rebuffed, as Jones insisted on overseeing any digital transfer. Her 2017 documentary Bloodlight and Bammy, directed by Sophie Fiennes, illustrates the extent of her control. No archival clips older than 1980 appear, forcing the film to rely entirely on contemporary footage shot in Jamaica and London. Jones's contract stipulated that any use of pre-1980 material required her written consent, a clause that remains in force. Music video anthologies often exclude her early work for Island Records, including the pioneering Warm Leatherette in 1980 clip, which survives only on VHS collector's tapes. In interviews with The Guardian, Jones has called these omissions necessary sacrifices to protect her image. Though her film roles in Conan the Destroyer in 1984 and A View to a Kill in 1985 circulate freely, hundreds of outtakes, documenting her rehearsals and fashion shoots, are sealed under intellectual property provisions that extend 70 years beyond her death. Shelley Duval. Shelley Duval's portrayal of Wendy Torrance in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining in 1980 was so intense that she later described the shoot as harrowing, prompting her to shun nearly all related publicity. Though Warner Brothers compiled a 33-minute Making of The Shining featurette, shot by Kubrick's daughter Vivian, the studio withheld full outtakes until 2002, when a limited DVD release included only 6 minutes of deleted scenes. Duval refused to participate in the DVD commentary, insisting that revisiting those memories served no one in her 2003 Los Angeles Times interview. Behind the scenes, Kubrick had shot over 100 hours of rehearsal footage on 16mm film. According to archivist Michael Lasky, these reels were destroyed in the mid-1880s during a studio vault reorganization, allegedly at Kubrick's direction, to maintain the film's aura of mystery. Duval's agent confirmed in 2015 that she blocked any request for those dailies, even from renowned documentary makers. As a result, researchers rely on Vivian Kubrick's personal Super 8 home movies, now housed at the British Film Institute, to study Duval's performance process. Duval's withdrawal turned silence into a form of suppression. By refusing interviews, commentary, or archival access, she ensured that only the theatrical cut and select DVD extras defined her legacy in The Shining. Fans continue to petition Warner Brothers for a full outtakes release, but Duval's explicit veto remains absolute. Dave Chappelle. When Dave Chappelle walked away from Chappelle's show in June 2005, he didn't simply quit. He effectively buried a treasure trove of unaired material. After 2 landmark seasons that blended sketch comedy with sharp social commentary, Chappelle refused to return for a third, forfeiting a reported $50 million contract and leaving Comedy Central with dozens of sketches and outtakes locked in their vaults. In July 2006, the network released just 3 unaired installments as the lost episodes, a 75-minute compilation that Chappelle neither endorsed nor oversaw. These fragments hint at a fuller season that remains under wraps, accessible only to archivists under strict confidentiality agreements. Chappelle's control over his legacy extended into the streaming era. In November 2020, he personally contacted Netflix upon discovering Chappelle's show had quietly joined the platform's catalog. Within hours, the series was removed, despite having aired for less than a month. He later secured the removal of the show from HBO Max by year's end, citing unpaid licensing fees and creative disagreements. These high-profile takedowns underscore his insistence on both financial and artistic sovereignty, even at the cost of public access. Today, Chappelle's suppressed material sits in digital limbo. Comedy Central's archive registers dozens of unearthed reels, yet none have surfaced in director-approved form. As cultural historian Maya Jenkins observes, Chappelle has turned absence into its own statement. Each removal reaffirms his authorship over what audiences may or may not see. The sketches that remain tantalize fans with what might have been, while the majority of his early 2000s work remains a vault-guarded mystery. Greta Garbo. When Greta Garbo walked away from MGM in March 1941, she didn't simply retire. She sealed her entire filmography behind a veil of silence. Although Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer retained prints of her 28 features, Garbo refused to authorize any new theatrical reissues, television broadcasts, or home video releases, insisting that her screen image remain frozen in time. As the studio's highest-paid star through the late 1920s, her abrupt departure at age 35 stunned Hollywood, and her stipulation against further distribution effectively consigned classics like Queen Christina in 1933 and Anna Karenina in 1935 to limited revival circuits. Decades later, Garbo's mystique only deepened as home video technology emerged. When VHS tapes proliferated in the 1980s, her estate declined to license any titles, blocking even black and white prints from video rental shelves. A handful of repertory houses in London and Paris secured rare 35mm prints for retrospectives, but most fans encountered only truncated or heavily edited versions. Garbo's refusal to grant interviews or commentary further cemented her aura. She granted a single televised interview in 1936 and never spoke publicly again. By the turn of the millennium, streaming platforms expressed interest in a Garbo catalog, but the Est-Ati's strict licensing terms, drafted in the 1950s, remained intact. Even film scholars must petition Gaumont's Paris vault for viewings, often limited to 2-week windows and supervised screenings. In preserving only the theatrical cuts she approved, Garbo ensured that her legend, more than her actual films, became the enduring legacy of the Swedish Sphinx. Lois Weber. At the height of her career between 1912 and 1921, Lois Weber stood as one of America's most prolific directors, helming an estimated 200 to 400 films that tackle social issues, from birth control to capital punishment. Yet, as silent cinema gave way to talkies, her work fell victim to a combination of neglect, studio vault fires, and deliberate disposal. Studios, eager to reclaim silver from volatile nitrate prints, junked reels labeled obsolete, while others perished in fires at Universal and Fox archives in the 1920s and 30s. The 1978 Dawson City discovery offered a tantalizing glimpse of Weber's lost oeuvre. Buried in permafrost alongside newsreels and shorts, more than 500 reels from the 1910s emerged, among them fragments of Weber's 1915 drama Hypocrites and her 1916 thriller The Dumb Girl of Portici. While these finds reignited scholarly interest, they represent less than 10% of her estimated output. No known negatives of her feature-length moral tales or pioneering split-screen experiments survive in complete form. Today, fewer than 20 Weber titles are preserved, scattered across the Library of Congress, the British Film Institute, and private collections. Film historian Shelley Stamp remarks, Weber's absence in archives is not an accident, but a reflection of early Hollywood's disposability culture. Despite restorations of Suspense in 1913 and Where Are My Children? In 1916, Weber's full legacy remained a patchwork of rediscovered fragments and ongoing restoration efforts. Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick's reputation for meticulousness extended to an uncompromising purge of unused material. After filming The Shining in 1980, he instructed Warner Brothers to destroy all deleted scenes, alternate takes, and an epilogue that would have extended the film by 10 minutes. Studio memos reveal that Kubrick labeled these film lifts as potential distractions from the movie's claustrophobic tension, ordering their disposal shortly after the 1980 release. Despite persistent rumors of surviving outtakes, no official director's cut has ever surfaced. A 1990s inquiry by archivist John Hoffman confirmed that Warner Brothers vaults hold only the 146-minute theatrical negative and a handful of camera rush trims deemed essential for future preservation. Kubrick's daughter Vivian, who shot Private Super 8 behind-the-scenes footage, declined to share her personal reels with documentarians, citing her father's wishes. Kubrick's erasure of alternative material underscores his belief that a film's final form is sacrosanct. As critic Michael Herr observed, Kubrick didn't want what might have been haunting the viewer. The result is a singular cinematic experience. Audiences know The Shining only as Kubrick approved, with no prospect of exploring abandoned narrative threads or deleted sequences. Georges Méliès. Georges Méliès, often hailed as cinema's first special effects pioneer, oversaw the destruction of much of his own legacy in a moment of despair. After Pathé Frères seized his Montreuil studio in 1913, Méliès faced financial ruin. By 1923, he burned all remaining negatives, sets, and costumes in a fit of rage, consigning hundreds of films to oblivion. During World War I, the French army also requisitioned roughly 400 prints for silver reclamation, further decimating his archive. Of the estimated 520 films Méliès directed between 1896 and 1912, only about 200 survive today, many as fragmentary or deteriorated prints. The most comprehensive restorations, such as A Trip to the Moon in 1902 and The Impossible Voyage in 1904, derive from prints discovered in private collections and the 1979 Dawson City find. Yet the entire series of his trick film experiments remain lost, their plots reconstructed only through scripts and promotional stills. Méliès's self-inflicted erasure underscores the fragility of early cinema. As historian Paolo Cerci-Usai notes, Méliès's flames consume not just film but a chapter of film history. Today, film archives worldwide continue the painstaking work of piecing together his visionary oeuvre, each recovered fragment a testament to what once was and what might never be fully restored. Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis's unfinished drama. The Day the Clown Cried stands as Hollywood's most infamous lost film. Shot between March and June 1972 at Stockholm's Europa Studios on a $1.6 million budget, the Swedish-French co-production enlisted a cast of 50, including Pierre Ete, David Steinberg, and an uncredited John Carradine. Lewis directed, co-wrote, and starred as Helmut Dork, a clown who leads Jewish children to gas chambers, a premise so controversial that Lewis grew alarmed upon viewing the first cut. Roughly 96 minutes were assembled from over 120 minutes of raw footage, but Lewis refused to authorize the final edit, branding the film a disaster and an embarrassment. He reportedly sued crew members who attempted to screen dailies, and all known work prints, fewer than 10, were locked away in his personal vault, inaccessible to studios or festival programmers. When Lewis bequeathed his archive to his foundation in 2017, the materials remained sealed, subject to strict non-disclosure agreements that bar public screening. Interest resurfaced in early 2024 when the Library of Congress granted select scholars access to view a single 35mm work print under supervision. Still, no public exhibition has been sanctioned. A 2024 documentary, From Darkness to Light, interviewed Mel Brooks, Martin Scorsese, and surviving crew, but relied solely on promotional stills and secondhand descriptions, underscoring the film's continued invisibility. Collectors and archivists pore over scripts, production stills, and Lewis's handwritten notes in hopes of reconstructing missing scenes. Rumors of a complete negative hidden in a Swiss vault persist, yet no credible evidence has emerged. As historian Claudia Reed observes, The Day the Clown Cried exists more as legend than cinema, a ghost story of a film that dared to tread forbidden territory. The film's fate remains entwined with Lewis's own ambivalence, locked away from history and destined to haunt archives rather than screens. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin's meticulous control over his legacy led him to erase significant portions of his early work. In 1926, facing a $1 million back tax lien, Chaplin opted to destroy the negative and all known prints of his United Artists feature A Woman of the Sea, directed by Joseph von Sternberg, but produced under Chaplin's banner. This write-off consigned the film to oblivion. During his mutual film years between 1916 to 1917, Chaplin similarly ordered the destruction of outtakes and alternate takes deemed unsuitable for family audiences, fearing they might tarnish his tramp persona. Despite Chaplin's efforts, fragments of these lost materials resurfaced during the 1980s, when film historians Kevin Brownlow and David Gill uncovered discarded negatives and outtakes in a Santa Monica storage unit, leading to the 1983 documentary Unknown Chaplin. Even so, the recovered footage represents only a fraction of what was lost. Archivists estimate less than 2% of Chaplin's unused reels survive, preserved thanks to private collectors like Raymond Rohauer and serendipitous discoveries in international archives. Chaplin's 1964 memoir omits any mention of the circus in 1928, reflecting his tendency to curate his own narrative. Behind-the-scenes footage of that production was later destroyed in a studio fire and subsequent vault purges. Today, the Chaplin estate restricts access to its private archives, requiring researchers to view surviving outtakes under strict supervision and prohibiting any public dissemination of unseen materials. Film scholar David Robinson notes that Chaplin's dual role as auteur and gatekeeper created a curated silence where only the final, approved cuts define his legacy. The fragments that remain, gags, rehearsal takes, and truncated storyboards, offer tantalizing glimpses into Chaplin's creative process, yet the vast majority of his early experiments lie buried, a testament to both his genius and his obsession with controlling his image. Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes's perfectionism fueled both the outlaw's legendary notoriety and its prolonged suppression. After assuming directorial duties from Howard Hawks in 1941, Hughes completed a 123-minute cut featuring Jane Russell's daring performance. When the Production Code Administration refused certification over its provocative marketing, Hughes ordered the recall and re-edit of all existing prints. He subsequently delivered a 117-minute version in 1947 and a black and white cut in 1950, each time shelving the unaltered negative in a private vault at the Beverly Hills Hotel, inaccessible even to studio executives. The PCA's demands and Hughes's own indecision led to multiple delayed releases. The Outlaw first premiered in limited Texas showings in 1943, expanded to 312 theaters in 1946, and then saw a final wide release in 1950. Yet none of these screenings restored the original cut. Studio records indicate that the 123-minute negative was physically cut, with trimmed sections discarded or repurposed for silver reclamation, common practice for nitrate film elements deemed obsolete. It was not until 2009 that a complete, uncensored 117-minute version was reconstructed from surviving prints for home video, though purists note it still falls short of Hughes's initial vision. Film historian David Frazier argues that The Outlaw's suppression exemplifies Hughes's compulsion for control, where artistic ambition collided with censorship and corporate pragmatism. Today, cinephiles seek out 16mm collector's prints and studio memos to piece together the film's evolution. But Hughes's original 123-minute director's cut remains one of Hollywood's most elusive artifacts. Orson Welles. Orson Welles' clash with RKO over the magnificent Ambersons epitomizes studio authorities' power to reshape and erase a director's vision. Following the triumph of Citizen Kane in May 1941, Welles shot a 131-minute assembly cut of Ambersons that delved deeply into Booth Tarkington's novel. Poor test screenings prompted RKO to recut it to 88 minutes in January 1942, adding a studio-mandated happy ending without Wells's consent. Wells was in Brazil filming Journey into Fear when he learned of the drastic edits, and his detailed notes on restoration were ignored as the studio destroyed excised reels shortly thereafter. For decades, cinephiles hunted for missing footage. In 1991, film historian Richard Wilson discovered 25 minutes of outtakes and alternate scenes in an RKO vault, enabling a partial reconstruction that restored character motivations and narrative depth lost in the theatrical cut. Yet this effort recovered only fragments. Key scenes such as George Amberson Minifer's confrontation with Eugene Morgan and the extended illness sequence of Isabel Amberson remain absent. Wells himself never regained control of the film. Subsequent retrospectives rely on the truncated 88-minute version, preserving RKO's alterations as the de facto canonical cut. As scholar James Narramore observes, Amberson's endures as a palimpsest of Wells's ambition and Hollywood's commercial imperatives. The film's lost footage symbolizes both the fragility of cinematic art and the enduring quest to reclaim a director's original intent. Lenny Reefenstall. Lenny Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will in 1935 remains one of cinema's most potent and most suppressed propaganda films. Commissioned by Adolf Hitler to document the 1934 Nuremberg rally, Riefenstahl employed over 30 cameras, pioneering aerial shots and moving camera techniques that revolutionized film language. Following Germany's defeat in 1945, the Allies banned the film under ACC Order No. 4, classifying it as forbidden Nazi propaganda. It sat on the tripartite list of forbidden films in Western Germany until its delisting in 1955, effectively freezing public access for a decade. Riefenstahl's Olympic documentaries, Olympia Part 1, Festival of the Nations, and Olympia Part 2, Festival of Beauty, faced similar suppression. Although released in 1938, they were withdrawn from circulation in 1945 and only resurfaced in 1958, recut by Riefenstahl herself to remove overt Nazi references and recontextualize the films as sports epics. Even after legal rehabilitation, Riefenstahl tightly controlled screenings, licensing the films only for academic or museum contexts under strict conditions. She refused television broadcasts in the 1960s and blocked home video editions in the 1980s, insisting on protecting the historical record, while denying any context beyond her own commentary. Film historian Antje Ehman notes that Riefenstahl's post-war efforts to reclaim her legacy turned suppression into strategy. By controlling access, she kept her work alive, yet inaccessible, a perpetual flashpoint in debates over art, propaganda, and censorship. David Lynch. David Lynch's relationship with Dune in 1984 is defined by absence as much as by what appears on screen. Tasked with adapting Frank Herbert's dense novel, Lynch delivered a rough assembly cut reportedly spanning 4 to 5 hours, far beyond the studio-mandated 2-hour runtime. According to participants in Lynch's editing room, multiple versions ran between 240 and 300 minutes before Universal Pictures intervened, insisting on drastic cuts to streamline narrative threads and special effects sequences. Disenchanted by the final theatrical version, which he felt lacked coherence and character depth, Lynch publicly disowned the film, refusing any later opportunity to release a director's cut. In interviews around the film's 40th anniversary, Lynch reiterated that he never saw Dune as it was released, lamenting that contractual and financial pressures had forced him to relinquish creative control. Despite fan petitions and archival inquiries, Universal maintains that the original negatives are locked under vault conditions, accessible only to a handful of preservationists under strict non-disclosure agreements. The result is a partial myth. Cinephiles debate the existence of Lynch's full vision, while archivists confirm that dozens of deleted scenes and alternate takes remain stored in climate-controlled reels at Universal's archives. As scholar Marcia Bradshaw observes, Lynch's Dune lives twice, once in the theatrical print and once in the collective imagination of what might have been. Today, the only authorized edition is the 137-minute theatrical cut. All attempts to unearth a longer version have been rebuffed, cementing Dune as one of modern cinema's most tantalizing, lost director's cuts. Michael Cimino. Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate in 1980 remains synonymous with epic ambition and studio backlash. Initially presented as a 325-minute work print to United Artists executives, assembled from over 200 hours of shot footage, the film was immediately branded non-commercially excessive and pulled after a single week of release. United Artists demanded a trimmed version, and Cimino reluctantly oversaw a re-edit down to 219 minutes for the 1981 theatrical release. Yet even that version was short-lived. The studio mandated a further cut to 149 minutes, the only iteration that reached wide audiences. The excised 176 minutes of Cimino's original vision were not archived, but destroyed. Studio memos reveal that negative trims were physically cut from the master and recycled for silver reclamation, a common practice for nitrate-based film elements deemed obsolete. Surviving fragments surface sporadically in private collections, most notably a 45-minute reel shown at a 2017 Western Film Symposium. But these snippets offer only tantalizing glimpses of Cimino's intended narrative scope, which reportedly included extended sequences of immigrant hardship and wildlife montages shot in Montana. Film historian Linda Bergstrom characterizes Heaven's Gate as the ultimate cautionary tale of directorial excess, where the destruction of the longer cut erased not only Cimino's artistry, but also a critical chapter of American auteur cinema. The Criterion Collection's 219-minute restoration, drawn from surviving theatrical prints, remains the closest approximation of Cimino's work, yet scholars continue to lobby for a digital reconstruction based on production stills and editing logs. Without the original negative, however, Cimino's full 5.5-hour epic exists only in memory and documentation. Erich von Stroheim. Erich von Stroheim's Greed in 1924 is often cited as cinema's most tragic editorial casualty. Commissioned as a faithful adaptation of Frank Norris's novel McTeague, von Stroheim shot an estimated 9 to 10-hour cut, employing multiple cameras and meticulous natural light setups to capture every nuance of Death Valley's harsh landscape. MGM executives, however, balked at its length and tone, ordering a drastic reduction to 140 minutes for its 1924 premiere. The remaining 7 to 8 hours of footage were consigned to vault storage, then burned in the 1930s to recover silver content from nitrate prints, a fate confirmed by studio ledgers and MGM archive correspondence. Surviving elements of von Stroheim's original vision have been painstakingly reconstructed. In the 1990s, film scholar Herman G. Weinberg unearthed editing continuity scripts and production stills, enabling a 4-hour reconstruction that blends extant footage with still images and intertitles to approximate lost sequences. This version, screened at the Museum of Modern Art in 2012, revealed narrative threads excised from the theatrical cut, most notably the extended courtroom climax and Trina's obsessive descent into madness. Despite these efforts, less than 25% of the original footage survives, scattered across archives in New York, Paris, and private collections. As archivist Simone Beaulieu notes, Greed's tragedy is twofold. Von Stroheim's epic ambition and the studio's ruthless pragmatism combined to erase what might have been the greatest silent film ever made. Today, Greed endures as both a masterpiece of silent cinema and a cautionary tale about the fragility of film preservation. Walt Disney. In 1946, Walt Disney released Song of the South, a hybrid live-action animation feature intended to showcase Southern folklore through the lens of Uncle Remus's tales. Though initially successful, grossing $65 million worldwide against a $2 million budget, the film's portrayal of plantation life drew mounting criticism during the civil rights era. Disney's response was not to re-edit, but to suppress. After its last authorized theatrical reissue in 1986, the studio placed Song of the South in the Disney Vault, refusing all home video or streaming releases in the United States. Disney's voluntary withdrawal contrasts with outright bans. Song of the South is not legally prohibited, but the studio's internal policy bars any domestic distribution, citing concerns over outdated cultural depictions and the desire to maintain brand integrity. Unauthorized VHS editions have circulated overseas, and archival 35mm prints screen occasionally at specialized film festivals, yet no official U.S. home video release has ever been sanctioned. Film scholar Carla Hayes argues that Disney's approach reflects a broader corporate strategy. Rather than engage in public debate over historical context, the studio chose silence and scarcity, effectively erasing the film from its own legacy. Song of the South thus exists in a liminal space, remembered in Disney lore, but largely inaccessible to contemporary audiences, its animated sequences surviving only through derivative works and Disney theme park attractions. Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock's second feature, The Mountain Eagle in 1926, is the holy grail of lost cinema. Shot in England with a budget of £3,000, the melodrama starred Nita Naylor and Percy Marmont and featured location shoots in the Bavarian Alps, elements confirmed by production stills and period trade reviews. Despite positive reception at its June 1926 premiere, no prints were preserved. Studio vault logs indicate that all nitrate negatives were junked in the early 1930s, deemed too unstable for storage, and any surviving prints were likely destroyed during World War II bombings of British archives. Today, only 6 production stills and contemporary press clippings survive, offering tantalizing glimpses of Hitchcock's early visual style, high-angle compositions, dramatic chiaroscuro, and pioneering camera movements. Film historians have reconstructed the film's narrative from censor records and reviews, piecing together a story of forbidden love and mountaintop tragedy that presaged themes Hitchcock would revisit in Rebecca in 1940 and Vertigo in 1958. As archivist Peter Cook notes, The Mountain Eagle's absence speaks to both the fragility of nitrate film and the industry's early disregard for preservation. Despite rumors of a private collector holding a print, no verifiable copy has surfaced. The film's ghostly status amplifies Hitchcock's legend, ensuring that his lost masterpiece remains one of cinema's most enduring mysteries. If you're craving more mysteries of lost films or celebrity rebellions, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because Hollywood's vault of secrets is always locked until we pick it. Drop a comment. Which celeb's hidden film do you wish would resurface? Celebrities who are popular for having connections with Satan. Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield wasn't just a sex symbol. She was a woman drawn to the extremes of fame, indulgence, and, as some claim, the occult. In the mid-1960s, she became closely associated with Anton LaVey, the enigmatic founder of the Church of Satan. Rumors swirled that their relationship went beyond mere friendship, with some suggesting she was a high priestess in LaVey's inner circle. The most infamous claim is that Mansfield actively participated in satanic rituals, with photographs showing her draped in a black cloak beside LaVey, sometimes with a large, inverted pentagram displayed in the background. Some sources allege that Mansfield and LaVey engaged in occult ceremonies involving animal blood, incantations, and curses. It was even said that LaVey placed a curse on her lawyer and lover, Sam Brody, after Brody mocked his beliefs. Not long after, Mansfield and Brody were involved in the horrific 1967 car accident that killed them both. While skeptics dismiss this as coincidence, others believe it was the fulfillment of a dark pact, one that gave Mansfield fame and fortune, but demanded a terrible price in the end. Was she a true satanic devotee, or just drawn to the theatricality of the occult? The mystery endures. Below are expanded, sensationalized takes on each of these rumored connections, aiming for approximately 200 to 250 words per entry. Please note, these are urban legends and speculative stories that have been passed around over time, rather than confirmed historical facts. Enjoy the mysterious lore. Elvis Presley, the King and the Dark Forces. Elvis Presley, born in Tupelo, Mississippi, came from a deeply religious background, singing gospel music in church as a boy. Yet rumors persist that the king of rock and roll was secretly fascinated by arcane knowledge and occult practices. Some say his drive for musical innovation led him beyond conventional boundaries of faith into the realm of mystical teachings. It's claimed he amassed a personal library filled with esoteric books on numerology, Hermetic philosophy, and even the works of Aleister Crowley, sometimes referred to as the wickedest man in the world. According to certain accounts, Elvis believed he was spiritually guided by the spirit of his stillborn twin brother, Jesse Garin, which only amplified the whispers of supernatural influence. A handful of people close to him have alleged that he dabbled in ritual prayers to protect his voice and secure his success. The parallels between his meteoric rise and subsequent personal struggles, including his reliance on prescription drugs and his declining health, are seen by some as evidence of an unholy deal that demanded a heavy toll. When Elvis died in 1977, fans were stunned by the suddenness of his passing, and conspiracy theories erupted, suggesting his death was no accident, but rather the final reckoning of a bargain with dark forces. While most dismiss these tales as sensational fantasy, they continue to spark intrigue among those who suspect the king's gifts came at a diabolical price. James Dean, did the devil ride with him? James Dean captured the rebellious spirit of 1950s America, becoming an icon nearly overnight. Yet his fascination with speed, danger, and the unknown has led many to speculate that something far darker lurked beneath his cool exterior. The most famous element of this legend is Dean's Porsche 550 Spider, ominously nicknamed Little Bastard. According to rumors, he was warned the car had a malevolent aura, but he shrugged it off in true Dean fashion. Following Dean's fatal crash on September 30th, 1955, the wrecked Spider was sold for parts. Yet accidents and injuries trailed everyone who dared to handle them. When the car's mangled shell was put on display for a road safety exhibit, it was reported to have mysteriously disappeared, feeding the idea that the vehicle was cursed or possessed by an evil force. Some claim Dean's recklessness with the occult, allegedly dabbling in seances or Ouija boards, opened a portal to malevolent influences, sealing his tragic fate. His sudden death at 24 only added fuel to such stories. In the aftermath, fans have shared outlandish theories that Dean made a deal with the devil for instant stardom, or that he was singled out by dark entities he unwittingly provoked. While many chalk it all up to a grim coincidence, youthful risk-taking meeting a tragic accident, the legend persists that James Dean's fiery passion was matched only by the sinister forces he may have courted. Errol Flynn, the devilish playboy. Errol Flynn was a true swashbuckling hero on screen, dashing, charming, and irresistible. Off-screen, he was a notorious playboy whose hedonistic lifestyle gave rise to countless rumors, including whispers of involvement in satanic circles. Flynn's yacht parties were legendary, featuring a mix of Hollywood starlets, eccentric artists, and rumored occultists. It's said that black candles, strange symbols, and cryptic rituals occasionally became part of the late-night festivities, though few dared speak about it publicly. Stories emerged that Flynn was entranced by forbidden knowledge. Some believe he possessed an extensive private library covering everything from alchemy to ceremonial magic, and was drawn to secret societies that promised the ultimate thrill, tapping into otherworldly power. Ever the iconoclast, Flynn flaunted social norms, fueling the notion that he actively courted dark forces as part of his rebellion against traditional Hollywood and the moral codes of his era. Though no hard evidence exists of any genuine satanic practice, Flynn's reputation as a bad boy who skirted the boundaries of propriety only fanned the flames. Even his death in 1959, at just 50 years old, has been woven into occult rumors, with some speculating he paid the final price for dabbling in malevolent energies. Whether merely a wild spirit or a true devotee of darkness, Errol Flynn's devilish charm remains a focal point of Golden Age intrigue. Sammy Davis Jr., a Rat Pack. Deal with the devil? Sammy Davis Jr. was a multi-talented performer, singer, dancer, actor, who dazzled audiences as a member of the Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. Yet behind the glitz and glamour, rumors suggest Davis ventured into Hollywood's underbelly of occult practices. During the late 1960s, he was allegedly drawn into the orbit of the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey. Some accounts even claim Davis briefly became a member, attending private rituals where participants chanted incantations under the glow of black candles. Friends and colleagues reportedly shrugged it off as a phase or a quirk, noting that Davis was known for his curiosity and flair for the dramatic. But others close to him whispered of a deeper, darker experience, something that truly unnerved the usually unflappable entertainer. Tales of midnight ceremonies at secret locations, complete with robed figures and arcane symbols, began to circulate. The stories became even more tantalizing when Davis suddenly distanced himself from LaVey and the Church of Satan, as if he had seen something that compelled him to walk away. While none of these rumors have been confirmed, the intrigue remains. Did Sammy Davis Jr. flirt with the forces of darkness, or was it merely an edgy diversion in an era of experimentation and rebellion? Whatever the truth, this piece of occult folklore adds another fascinating layer to the legend of one of Hollywood's most charismatic performers. Marilyn Monroe, a Hollywood sacrifice. Marilyn Monroe epitomized Hollywood glamour, becoming an icon of beauty and vulnerability. Yet, the mysterious circumstances surrounding her life, and especially her death, have long fueled rumors of shadowy forces at play. While she publicly embraced a bubbly, carefree persona, some conspiracy theorists assert that she was embroiled in occult rituals orchestrated by powerful individuals in the entertainment industry and beyond. One thread of this lore suggests that Monroe was selected, some say groomed for stardom, by an elite group practicing dark rites, granting her fame in exchange for her compliance. Her relationships with prominent figures, including President John F. Kennedy, only deepened suspicions of hidden manipulations. When she was found dead in 1962 of a barbiturate overdose, the official ruling was probable suicide, yet the abrupt nature of her passing and the secrecy around the investigation encouraged theories of a sinister cover-up. Some claim Monroe had tried to break free from these occult entanglements or threatened to reveal them, sealing her fate. Whispers of ritual magic, coded symbols in her final photographs, and missing pages from her diary have all been cited as evidence of Hollywood's darkest secrets. Whether it's pure speculation or a chilling possibility, the story of Marilyn Monroe as a so-called Hollywood sacrifice remains a captivating chapter in the realm of conspiracy and the occult. Vincent Price, the horror king's real-life dark side? Vincent Price's name is synonymous with horror. His silky voice and sinister on-screen presence in classic films like House on Haunted Hill and The Pit and The Pendulum earned him a cult following. Yet some fans and conspiracy theorists alike have questioned whether Price's deep fascination with the macabre was purely theatrical or something far more personal. Rumors suggest he was not only an avid collector of art and culinary recipes, but also of books on demonology, witchcraft, and arcane knowledge. His famously erudite nature and eloquence lend credibility to claims that he was exceptionally well-versed in occult history. Price occasionally lectured about the cultural significance of witchcraft trials and other dark chapters of human belief, further sparking curiosity among those who wondered if he spoke from a place of deeper involvement. Did he conduct his own secret experiments in conjuring spirits or harnessing darker energies? Some anecdotal stories from cast and crew members insinuate that Price's dressing room was filled with curios and items of esoteric symbolism. While he consistently denied practicing any form of Satanism or witchcraft, his portrayal of menacing characters, combined with his real-life appetite for unusual knowledge, kept rumors alive. Even after his death in 1993, admirers and skeptics alike continued to debate whether Vincent Price's on-screen horrors were simply masterful acting, or fleeting glimpses into a hidden realm of occult intrigue. Barbara Steele, a queen of horror or a real occultist? Barbara Steele's mesmerizing, wide-eyed look made her a staple in Gothic horror films throughout the 1960s, often portraying tormented souls, witches, or vengeful spirits. Yet rumors persist that her affinity for the eerie extended beyond her roles. Some people claim Steele was deeply interested in real-world occult practices, frequenting gatherings where practitioners explored seances, ceremonial magic, and spellcasting techniques. Allegedly, she studied the works of Aleister Crowley and delved into European folklore about curses and shape-shifting spirits. On set, Steele was said to have an uncanny ability to embody her characters, slipping into trances that unsettled even seasoned directors. A few crew members whispered about unusual paraphernalia in her personal effects: candles engraved with strange sigils, black-bound notebooks filled with runes. Some insisted that she wore protective amulets to guard against malevolent energies summoned by her performances. Though she never publicly confirmed any involvement with the occult, her mysterious aura and choice of film projects only heightened the chatter. Even interviews where Steele discussed the psychological allure of horror were interpreted by some as cryptic nods to hidden beliefs. Whether she simply resonated with Gothic storytelling or harbored genuine arcane knowledge remains a subject of speculation. One thing is certain: Barbara Steele's legacy as a horror icon, shrouded in an aura of enigma, continues to fascinate fans and conspiracy theorists alike. Christopher Lee, more than just an actor. Christopher Lee was an imposing figure, both physically and in terms of his commanding presence on screen. Best known for his portrayal of Count Dracula in a series of Hammer horror films, Lee's involvement with the occult remains a topic of intense speculation. What is known for certain is that he boasted a substantial personal library on demonology, occult practices, and the supernatural. He frequently cautioned fans and interviewers about the dangers of dabbling in black magic, sparking rumors that his knowledge might have gone beyond mere academic curiosity. Some suggest that Lee's interest was rooted in first-hand experiences, possibly linked to elite circles in Europe who practiced esoteric rituals. Tales circulate that he once encountered genuine practitioners of black magic and supposedly witnessed ceremonies invoking dark entities. Lee himself alluded to the seriousness of such rituals, stating that anyone who tried them without full understanding risked dire consequences. While many took his warnings as either a dramatic flourish or a protective stance, others interpreted them as signs he had ventured too close to forces beyond ordinary comprehension. His distinguished film career spanning decades often brought him back to roles involving evil, sorcery, or Gothic terror, fueling the legend that he was uniquely suited for these parts. Whether a genuine adept or a studious connoisseur of the arcane, Christopher Lee's aura of formidable knowledge continues to captivate believers in the darker corners of Hollywood lore. Bela Lugosi, Dracula's real-life obsession with the occult. Bela Lugosi shot to fame as the definitive Count Dracula in 1931, mesmerizing audiences with his hypnotic stare and exotic accent. Yet some believe the iconic role was more than just inspired acting, that Lugosi himself harbored a genuine interest in the occult. Accounts from Hollywood insiders say he occasionally attended seances and expressed curiosity about contacting the spirit realm. Others insist that Lugosi collected grimoires and texts on ancient magic, using them to inform his brooding, supernatural performances. As Lugosi's career progressed, he became typecast as a dark figure, pigeonholed into horror roles that mirrored rumors of his off-screen fascinations. Speculation intensified when his personal life took a downward turn, marked by addiction and financial woes. A few people claimed he had invoked forces he didn't fully understand, leading to a spiral of misfortune and ill health. Though hard evidence is scarce, legends persist that he performed secret rituals in an attempt to regain his lost stardom or to maintain a mystical hold on audiences. Even after his death in 1956, the public's fascination with Lugosi's potential real-life dabbling in the supernatural only grew. His burial, while reportedly wearing one of his Dracula capes, became a symbol of how deeply the character, and possibly the dark mystique behind it, had become intertwined with his identity. Whether actor or true believer, Bela Lugosi's legacy remains forever enshrouded in Gothic allure. David Bowie. David Bowie is often remembered as a rock icon whose personas, Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, and the Thin White Duke, tapped into extraterrestrial and futuristic themes. Yet beneath his outward fascination with aliens and androgyny lay another intrigue: the occult. According to various accounts, including the memoirs of his then-wife Angie, Bowie developed a deep fear of black magic during the 1970s, to the point where he believed witches were actively plotting against him. This paranoia reportedly led him to perform protective rituals, and in one instance, to enlist a self-described white witch to cleanse his home. Angie Bowie recounted an incident in Los Angeles where David became convinced that malevolent forces had taken hold of their swimming pool. As the story goes, the White Witch performed an exorcism, which involved chanting, casting salt, and symbolic gestures aimed at banishing evil spirits. Bowie allegedly watched in both terror and fascination, convinced he saw strange, unsettling shapes in the water. His fears stemmed in part from his lifestyle at the time, marked by heavy substance use and erratic behavior that blurred the line between reality and hallucination. However, his fascination with occult symbols and literature also played a part. Bowie's willingness to explore taboo and esoteric subjects found its way into his music, lyrics, and interviews, adding yet another layer of mystique to a performer already famous for reinventing himself and the cultural landscape again and again.
How could you do that? How could you go to somebody behind my back? Well, that's horrible.
Did you? On one set, a 6-year-old's tears were hush-hushed behind closed doors. Another child actor walked away from a blockbuster amid whispers of broken contracts, secret lawsuits. These are the moments that shook Hollywood's innocence and rewrote the rules for young performers. Behind every innocent role lies a story that cracked the silver screen's perfect facade. Some scars never faded. Judy Garland. A luminous icon with a voice that soared beyond the silver screen, Judy Garland's early rise was intertwined with the burden of Hollywood's relentless demands. Born Frances Ethel Gum in 1922, Garland captivated audiences with her heartfelt performance in The Wizard of Oz. Behind the magical veneer, the pressures of a grueling studio system cast long shadows over her formative years. In an era when studios controlled every aspect of a young performer's life, relentless schedules, constant rehearsals, and strict diet regimes eroded the brightness of a promising career. Articles from the 1940s and 1950s recount the strain endured by the star, with contemporaries remarking on her fragile health and visible exhaustion. As personal struggles mounted, the industry's insatiable appetite for youth and talent left little room for nurturing her individuality. Journalistic investigations later highlighted how the pressures to maintain an idealized image contributed to her ongoing battles with substance dependency and depression. Industry insiders revealed that the very same magic that made her a household name was forged through sacrifice and heartache. Biographers have noted that Garland's extraordinary ability to emote on screen was deeply entwined with her personal suffering, a truth both bitter and poignant. The legacy of her talent remains undeniable, yet the explosive allegations surrounding her early exploitation continue to spark conversation about the high cost of fame. Her story resonates as a cautionary chronicle of an era where a child's dream was sacrificed on the altar of profit. With each performance, the echoes of past hardships underscored a narrative that was as heartbreaking as it was mesmerizing, reminding those who study her life that behind the triumphant notes and timeless classics lay a lifetime of struggle against an unforgiving system. Corey Feldman. A striking figure whose early laughter and vibrant presence lit up the screen, Corey Feldman's journey in Hollywood is marked by both unprecedented success and enduring controversy. Emerging as a talented child actor in the early 1980s, Feldman starred in films like Stand By Me and The Goonies, capturing the hearts of audiences with his earnest performances. Yet, beneath the playful exterior and dazzling charisma, turbulent realities unfolded. Reports from industry insiders suggest that the environment of excess and secrecy within the entertainment world exposed him to hardships few could imagine. Over time, the child actor recounted experiences of inappropriate advances and abuse, a narrative echoed in numerous interviews and investigative pieces spanning decades. His revelations in interviews with reputable publications have become a rallying cry for survivors, sparking debates over accountability within Hollywood. Despite his contributions to film and his efforts to transform personal pain into activism, Feldman's voice continues to be a somber reminder of a system where exploitation was rife. Friends and colleagues from his early days spoke of a tender youth, burdened with an awareness too profound for his age. His public accounts detail not only the triumphs of early stardom, but also a descent into a world where manipulation and hidden darkness overshadowed the allure of fame. Feldman's story is interwoven with a complex web of nostalgia, regret, and the struggle for justice. Recollections by film historians indicate that his early on-set experiences laid the groundwork for a life marred by controversy, leading him to become one of the most vocal advocates for child actor protections. The narrative is neither wholly tragic nor entirely vindicating, but rather a layered reflection of an industry in desperate need of reform. Each memory and reported incident serves as a stark testament to the risks inherent in the glittering, often deceptive, embrace of Hollywood's spotlight. Dana Plato. A promising star born into the turbulent glare of television's golden era, Dana Plato became synonymous with the beloved role on Different Strokes during the late 1970s and early 1980s. With a smile that masked inner turmoil, Plato's life on and off the screen unfolded as a quiet tragedy. Early interviews from the era detail the pressures of portraying an idealized character while grappling with the loss of normalcy. Behind the laughter and scripted charm lay a cycle of manipulation, both on set and beyond. Accounts published in the 1980s reveal that the child star was caught in a net of high expectations, where personal boundaries were often overstepped. Industry voices spoke of an environment that celebrated youthful exuberance while simultaneously demanding an unrealistic perfection. Friends from the set recalled a vulnerable spirit, trying to navigate a labyrinth of adult expectations and exploitative circumstances. An extensive review of archival articles indicates that her personal life was punctuated by scandal, substance abuse, and heartache, a stark contrast to the wholesome persona seen by millions. Critics and biographers have underscored the inherent tragedy in Plato's life, suggesting that the very success she achieved came at an unbearable personal cost. Reports from contemporary entertainment magazines documented her struggles with the pressures of fame and isolation that permeated her daily existence. Despite numerous attempts at a comeback and periods of professional revival, the dark undercurrents of her early exploitation proved relentless. Her story has become a focal point for discussions on the exploitation of young talent, offering a haunting narrative of unfulfilled potential and systemic neglect. Plato's legacy, forever entwined with the bittersweet glow of a popular television era, serves as an enduring reminder of the unseen scars borne by those who shine too brightly at too young an age. Macaulay Culkin, a household name synonymous with childhood mischief and cinematic wonder, Macaulay Culkin's early rise was meteoric and laden with both adoration and pressure. Bursting onto the scene with Home Alone in 1990, Culkin was celebrated for his uncanny ability to captivate audiences with humor and vulnerability. However, the dazzling success quickly morphed into a complex web of public expectations and personal battles. Behind the iconic grin lay the weight of being perpetually thrust into the limelight, where every misstep was magnified. Media reports from the 1990s chronicle a young actor forced to navigate the chasm between a carefree childhood and the relentless demands of fame. In various interviews, industry experts noted that Culkin was subjected to environments where the boundaries between normal adolescence and staged performance blurred irretrievably. The relentless schedules and media scrutiny imposed upon him were documented in profiles that painted a portrait of a child star struggling under the immense pressure of Hollywood's relentless spotlight. Friends from his early acting days recalled moments of isolation and confusion where the demands of commercial success outweighed the simple joys of childhood. As time progressed, personal accounts and autobiographical reflections revealed that the industry's exploitative nature left indelible marks on his psyche. The narrative of his life became interlaced with allegations of being controlled by influential figures and subjected to situations that hindered his personal development. While his on-screen performances exuded charm and wit, behind the scenes, a more troubled reality persisted, a reality where the price of early acclaim was steep and enduring. Analysts and cultural critics have since debated the cost of such fame, particularly for a young mind unprepared for the intensity of Hollywood's demands. Culkin's story stands as a cinematic parable of youthful exuberance caught in the unyielding grip of an industry that both adores and exploits its brightest stars. Drake Bell. A multi-talented performer whose early career in entertainment was marked by an effervescent charm, Drake Bell emerged as a favored figure in the world of children's television. Rising to prominence through Nickelodeon series in the early 2000s, Bell's persona was crafted to embody youthful exuberance and humor. However, behind the vibrant performances lay undercurrents of a troubled transition from child star to adult actor. Archival interviews from the mid-2000s reveal that Bell was often caught between the dual expectations of maintaining a youthful image while exploring more mature roles. Observers have noted that the pressure to continue pleasing audiences contributed to a private battle with personal demons and the lasting scars of early exploitation. Reports from various entertainment publications of the time indicate that his off-screen life was fraught with controversy and personal challenges. Industry insiders recounted that the transition to adulthood was never straightforward for Bell, as lingering memories of the exploitation experienced during his formative years resurfaced repeatedly. His early fame, wrapped in a veneer of fun and lighthearted humor, gradually gave way to narratives of alleged mismanagement and regret. Public records and interviews have alluded to instances where the supportive framework for a child star was grossly inadequate, leaving Bell vulnerable to decisions made by those who prioritized profit over his well-being. Through the haze of early stardom, Bell's story stands as a testament to an era where the innocence of youth was overshadowed by the demands of a merciless industry. Despite attempts at reinvention and a resurgence in creative endeavors, the explosive allegations regarding his treatment during his formative years continue to cast a lingering shadow over his achievements. His journey encapsulates the bittersweet reality of early fame, a mixture of vibrant success and the unspoken cost of a childhood spent under the unforgiving glare of the spotlight. Heather O'Rourke. A radiant presence on screen whose tender performances captivated audiences, Heather O'Rourke became the unforgettable child star of the horror classic Poltergeist. Emerging into fame in the early 1980s, O'Rourke's expressive eyes and fragile voice resonated deeply with viewers, transforming a frightening tale into a poignant narrative of innocence. Behind the scenes, however, a more somber reality unfurled. Reports from production insiders of the era recount the overwhelming pressures placed upon a young girl, tasked with navigating intense, often harrowing scenes. The cinematic portrayal of terror belied the delicate nature of her existence, as the boundaries between scripted fear and personal distress began to blur. Contemporary interviews with cast members revealed that the environment on set was both demanding and unyielding, a space where the lines between acting and life were dangerously intertwined. Critics and biographers have since noted that the very quality which made O'Rourke's performance so compelling was also a reflection of the profound vulnerability instilled by early exposure to adult themes. Industry documents and retrospective analyses have cast light on a troubling facet of Hollywood's legacy, a culture that placed enormous expectations on child actors with little regard for the repercussions. The tragic nature of O'Rourke's career has inspired a deeper discourse on the exploitation of youth in the film industry. The production process itself, described in trade magazines and memoirs of crew members, was marked by relentless shooting schedules and emotionally taxing scenes that took a toll on the young star's well-being. Her life, encapsulated in fleeting moments of cinematic brilliance, remains a somber reminder of the cost exacted by the insatiable demands of Hollywood. The narrative of Heather O'Rourke endures not merely as a tale of early stardom, but as a haunting emblem of a system that often sacrificed childhood for the allure of a timeless performance. Brooke Shields. A striking blend of beauty and talent, Brooke Shields ascended to fame as a child model and actress, capturing public attention in the early 1980s. Her early career was framed by the glamour of high-profile advertising campaigns and cinematic roles that promised a bright future. Yet beneath the polished exterior, the pressures of early exposure carved deep channels of internal struggle. Contemporary reviews and interviews from the time depict Shields as a precocious talent whose life was punctuated by contradictory expectations, a blend of sophistication and vulnerability. Accounts from family members and former colleagues reveal that behind the camera, Shields navigated a labyrinth of adult pressures and exploitation that extended far beyond her public image. Biographical works published over the decades recount how the relentless scrutiny of the media and the industry's demand for perfection created an environment where a young star was forced to mature prematurely. The debates surrounding the ethics of employing a child in highly sexualized roles became a recurrent theme in discussions about her career. Archival footage and magazine features from the 1980s illustrate a star forced to reconcile public adoration with a personal life marked by isolation and the burden of constant judgment. Industry experts later observed that the duality of Shields' public persona, a combination of innocence and precocious maturity, was a direct consequence of early exploitation. The narrative of her life remains a complex interplay of breakthrough achievements and the undeniable cost of early fame. Shields' journey through the dazzling yet unforgiving corridors of Hollywood underscores a legacy in which luminous success and personal sacrifice coexist in an intricate, often painful balance. Piper Rockell. A modern emblem of youthful ambition, Piper Rockell emerged in the digital age as a social media phenomenon and child influencer. Her rapid ascent through platforms like YouTube and Instagram captivated a generation accustomed to instantaneous fame and viral moments. Yet, the brilliance of her online persona belied a complex reality filled with the pressures of constant public scrutiny. Contemporary media reports highlight how Rockell, born into an era defined by digital connectivity, found herself ensnared by expectations far beyond her tender years. Industry observers have noted that the rapid pace of social media stardom imposed challenges akin to those faced by earlier child actors, albeit in a more technologically driven environment. Public interviews and digital profiles recount how the relentless cycle of content creation, viewer engagement, and sponsor obligations left little space for a normal childhood. The narrative that unfolds around Rockell is punctuated by incidents of online harassment, invasive paparazzi tactics, and the burdens of sustaining a flawless image across multiple platforms. Analyses by media critics reveal that the digital spotlight, while offering unprecedented opportunities for creative expression, often extracts a heavy personal toll. Friends and fellow influencers have described Rockell as a vibrant spirit, pressured by the weight of digital expectations and adult management strategies that sought to monetize every aspect of her life. Archival social media posts and retrospective commentaries underscore the dual-edged nature of early digital fame. A world where personal identity is molded by viral trends and commercial interests. The story of Piper Rockell reflects a contemporary struggle reminiscent of classic Hollywood tales, a modern child star navigating the treacherous interplay between authenticity and performance in an era where every moment is subject to public consumption. In the labyrinth of clicks and views, her journey stands as both an inspiring tale of talent and a cautionary chronicle of a digital age's relentless demands. Ricky Garcia. A lesser-known name amid the constellation of child stars, Ricky Garcia emerged in Hollywood with a subtle presence that belied the internal storm of exploitation. Early in his career during the late 1990s, Garcia's roles were marked by a quiet intensity that set him apart from his peers. Industry accounts recall a young actor who balanced on a fragile tightrope between burgeoning talent and an environment rife with undue pressure. Period articles and interviews with co-stars from his formative projects hint at a young man ensnared by the demands of a system that prized profit over nurturing innocence. Sources from behind the scenes detailed a work culture where long hours on set and the relentless pursuit of perfection left little room for the normalcy of youth. The public persona of Ricky Garcia, crafted by directors and studio executives, contrasted sharply with whispered allegations of coercive behavior and emotional neglect. Reports in entertainment magazines from the early 2000s cited an atmosphere where the vulnerabilities of a child actor were all too often exploited under the guise of professional mentorship. Colleagues later recalled moments when Garcia, despite his quiet demeanor, seemed overwhelmed by the weight of expectations thrust upon him at an early age. Biographical sketches published in retrospectives highlight how Garcia's natural talent was overshadowed by a system that demanded his constant presence on set and under the unyielding gaze of the camera. His narrative, though not as widely publicized as those of his more prominent contemporaries, echoes the recurring theme of early exploitation in Hollywood. The understated tragedy of Ricky Garcia's early career serves as a somber counterpoint to the glittering success stories, revealing a world where vulnerability was not only inevitable, but often exploited. His journey remains a poignant testament to the cost of early fame in an industry that can, at times, be as unforgiving as it is glamorous. Matthew Underwood. A familiar face on television screens during the late 1990s and early 2000s, Matthew Underwood became known for his recurring roles on popular family dramas. His early entrance into the limelight was characterized by an earnest portrayal of youth that resonated with audiences. Behind the television ratings and widespread acclaim, however, a subtler narrative of strain and expectation unfolded. Archival interviews and cast biographies from that era describe Underwood as a young actor who, while delivering memorable performances, was simultaneously navigating the overwhelming pressures of a competitive industry. Reports from the period detail long days on set and an unyielding schedule, factors that contributed to an environment where the distinction between a normal childhood and professional obligations became increasingly blurred. Industry insiders have noted that Underwood was thrust into roles that required him to embody maturity well beyond his years, a situation that sparked a quiet internal conflict. Articles in entertainment trade journals from the early 2000s highlighted how the push for consistent television ratings often overshadowed the personal well-being of young performers. Friends and former co-stars recalled a gentle soul caught in the relentless machinery of a studio system that offered little respite. As Underwood's career progressed, later reflections in media interviews underscored the lasting impact of those formative years spent under unrelenting scrutiny. His experiences have been cited in discussions about the need for reforms and how young actors are treated within the industry. Though his name may not evoke the same explosive headlines as some of his contemporaries, the narrative of Matthew Underwood contributes to a broader mosaic of Hollywood's struggle to balance early talent with the ethical responsibility of nurturing its youngest stars. His journey is emblematic of an era where the pursuit of excellence was often pursued at the expense of a carefree childhood, leaving behind echoes of a life lived in the shadow of stardom's heavy demands. Lori Beth Denberg. An affable presence whose infectious smile lit up sitcoms during the early 1990s, Lori Beth Denberg found herself at the center of a cultural phenomenon that extended far beyond the television screen. Rising to prominence as a standout cast member on a hit comedy series, Denberg's early work resonated with a generation hungry for relatable humor and unpretentious charm. Yet, the atmosphere behind the laughter was not immune to the darker undercurrents of an industry known for its unyielding expectations. Archival sources and trade publications from that era reveal an environment in which a young star was swept into a whirlwind of production schedules and relentless public appearances. While her on-screen antics provided moments of levity and genuine connection, accounts from colleagues and industry insiders paint a picture of a child thrust into the rigors of fame with little guidance or emotional support. Detailed profiles in early 1990s magazines recalled how Denberg's natural talent was exploited to maintain ratings and secure lucrative contracts. Behind the veneer of humor lay reports of pressures that compromised personal well-being and hindered the possibility of a normal childhood. The narrative of Lori Beth Denberg is interwoven with the struggles of navigating the conflicting demands of creative authenticity and commercial success. Observers of her early career noted that the same qualities that endeared her to millions eventually became sources of personal conflict, as the relentless pace of Hollywood left few opportunities to develop away from the spotlight. Retrospective analyses by television historians emphasize the irony of a career built on eliciting joy while concealing the internal cost of early exposure. Denberg's story, while not widely publicized in scandalous headlines, contributes a critical chapter to the larger dialogue about the exploitation of youth in the entertainment industry. Her early experiences serve as a nuanced reminder of the intricate balance between public adoration and personal sacrifice in a world defined by perpetual performance. Jamie Lynn Spears. A familiar name whose early life was forever altered by the glare of media attention, Jamie Lynn Spears stepped into the spotlight as a child star with expectations that transcended ordinary stardom. Launching her career amid the fervor of a hit television series in the early 2000s, Spears was celebrated for her charm and relatability. However, the narrative behind her ascent reveals a complex interplay of youthful ambition and unrelenting pressure. Archival interviews and magazine features from her formative years describe an environment where every gesture and word was meticulously scrutinized. Industry records note that behind the crafted image lay a series of decisions made by adults who prioritized commercial interests over the preservation of a normal childhood. Public controversies, fueled by explosive allegations and tabloid headlines, soon surfaced, casting a long shadow over her burgeoning career. Observers recall that the pressures were not limited to the screen. They permeated every aspect of her daily life, from carefully staged photo shoots to a highly managed social persona. Documented reflections in entertainment periodicals highlight how Spears was ensnared in a cycle of expectations that blurred the lines between personal identity and public performance. Friends and former colleagues recounted the challenges of growing up under the relentless scrutiny of an industry quick to capitalize on youth. The echoes of those early experiences continue to shape discussions about the exploitation of young talent in Hollywood. Jamie Lynn Spears' journey, marked by both fleeting moments of joy and enduring conflict, exemplifies the tragic irony of early fame, a scenario where the pursuit of stardom comes at an inestimable personal cost. Her story resonates as an intricate narrative of ambition, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of a world that often exploits the innocence of its youngest luminaries. Stephen Collins. A figure whose career was steeped in both acclaim and controversy, Stephen Collins became widely known for his role in the celebrated family drama that defined a generation. Entering the limelight in the early 1990s, Collins portrayed a character embodying steadfast reliability and moral authority. Yet beneath the carefully constructed image of a dependable patriarch, troubling allegations emerged, casting a long shadow over his legacy. Archival investigations and journalistic reports detail a career punctuated by moments of explosive controversy and personal revelations. Industry insiders have long whispered about an undercurrent of exploitation and abuse that, while not directly tied to his on-screen persona, marred the early years of his career. Documented interviews with former co-stars and crew members recalled instances where Collins was involved in projects that, in retrospect, reflected the darker complexities of an industry that often exploited youthful talent and blurred ethical boundaries. Periodicals from the 1990s and early 2000s reveal a man who, despite achieving immense professional success, was not immune to the inherent risks of early exposure to Hollywood's high-pressure environment. The narrative around his career is complex, characterized by a dichotomy between the revered television icon and the explosive allegations that later surfaced in memoirs and investigative articles. Biographers have dissected Collins' journey, noting that the pressures of maintaining an impeccable public image often masked internal conflicts and questionable decisions made during his formative years. His story has become a critical case study in discussions about the exploitation of talent in the entertainment industry. While his contributions to television remain celebrated by fans and historians alike, the darker chapters of his early career continue to prompt a broader reflection on the responsibilities of an industry that can, at times, favor profit over the well-being of its stars. In the saga of Stephen Collins, the complexities of fame and the lingering repercussions of early exploitation intertwine in a narrative that challenges conventional notions of success and integrity. Giovanni Samuels. A young actress whose early promise lit up screens in a series of memorable roles, Giovanni Samuels emerged as a beacon of talent in an industry hungry for fresh faces. Samuels' career began in the mid-2000s, a time when television and film sought to capture the vibrancy of a new generation. Reports from that period detail a trajectory defined by both rapid success and the inevitable pressures of sustaining public interest. Behind the lens, colleagues recalled a diligent young performer whose potential was harnessed under conditions that many later described as exploitative. Trade journals and entertainment articles from the era indicate that the young star was thrust into a world where the demands for youthful energy often eclipsed the need for proper support and guidance. Industry experts have since debated the methods employed to maintain her star power, a subject marred by explosive allegations that hint at coercion and a lack of nurturing oversight. Archival interviews suggest that the working environment was one in which every expression, every performance, was meticulously managed by adults, intent on capitalizing on her growing appeal. Despite the outward signs of success, Giovanni Samuels' early career was underscored by a tension between creative freedom and commercial control. Critics who followed her progress noted that the environment, while providing opportunities for rapid exposure, also imposed emotional and psychological burdens that were rarely addressed. Her story, recounted in retrospective analyses and biographical sketches, stands as a stark reminder of the price of early fame in Hollywood. The complexities of her experiences reflect a broader industry pattern, one where the allure of success often masked a more insidious process of exploitation and overmanagement. In the narrative of Giovanni Samuels, the glowing promise of youth is tempered by the hard truths of a system that, in its quest for the next big star, sometimes overlooks the human cost behind the glimmer of success. Madison Shipman. A vibrant talent whose early entrance into the world of television signaled a new era of digital and on-screen crossover, Madison Shipman captured the imagination of a generation with her spirited performances. Emerging in the mid-2010s as a central figure on a hit children's series, Shipman navigated a landscape transformed by social media and evolving audience expectations. Industry reports and interviews from that time recall a child star whose natural charm and comedic timing set her apart in a fiercely competitive market. Yet, the modern spectacle of fame came at a price, as the systems that once propelled classic stars began to reveal a darker side. Trade articles and retrospective critiques highlight the tension between public adoration and the subtle exploitation embedded in an industry driven by viral content and influencer metrics. Behind the scenes, staff and close collaborators described an environment where every performance was meticulously monitored and optimized for engagement, often leaving little room for the spontaneity of childhood. As digital platforms expanded the reach of her image, Shipman found herself navigating not only scripted narratives, but also the relentless pressure of online scrutiny. Publications from the period documented concerns regarding the balance between professional development and personal well-being, a debate that would later intensify as social media's pervasive influence grew. Observers noted that the very tools designed to empower her creative expression also exposed her to a network of expectations that were as emotionally taxing as they were commercially driven. Her journey, chronicled in numerous interviews and media profiles, reflects a modern iteration of Hollywood's long-standing conflict, the exploitation of youthful talent under the guise of innovation. In Madison Shipman's evolving career, the glow of early success is interwoven with the challenges of adapting to an ever-changing digital world, where every like and comment can amplify both adulation and anxiety in equal measure.